a lot of the AI models just natively do not really know how to answer a geospatial or like a where question.
Today, I am talking with Kieran McCann from Mapbox, a company that's powering some of the most important maps and location intelligence we use every day. We dive deep into his career journey, first helping Apple clean their map data, and now helping define Mapbox's next big bet, AI native mapping.
Could there be an agent that you drag into your workflow that handles everything to do with a where question and then passes that response back?
Kieran shares a journey a lot of us can relate to. Geology degree, a few GIS courses you weren't sure would matter, and a first job doing the grunt work, and then discovering how those small skills can open unexpected doors.
And then that kind of gave me some skills that I came out of school with that ended up landing in my first job, which was a contractor at Apple Maps. A lot of grunt work, like going through tickets and, analyzing like what's wrong with this road segment, what's going on here. And then I ended up finding Mapbox, which had some sales roles open.
But what's most exciting is where things are going now. We talk about the gap between AI and spatial understanding, why large language models still can't reliably handle directions, points of interest, or a true sense of place. And most importantly, how Mapbox is experimenting with agents and APIs that will let AI work with maps the way humans do.
There's so much turnover in the relevancy of the knowledge. You need to kind of embrace that you're not going to know everything. Even like tomorrow, there's going to be something that makes what you know today out of date.
You'll also hear about Kieran's own AI experiments, from building a personal airport travel time tool to an AI map style editor that went from side project to real product ideas at Mapbox. His advice for professionals: don't wait to be caught up. Start building, because the field is rewriting itself every few months.
It's way easier to explain an idea if you've already got a kind of working version, even if it's like a V0, V1, and then it helps you communicate.
If you're curious where mapping and AI are heading, not just technically, but as a business opportunity and a career edge, this episode is going to spark a lot of ideas. The future is spatial, so let's get into it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. My name's Kieran. I sit on the business team at Mapbox. And fun fact, today's actually my 6-year anniversary there. So it's been a long time in the seat. I've seen the company sort of evolve from the early days. Yeah, so my journey kind of started in mapping and geospatial back in school, back in university. I went to University of Oregon and studied geology there. And most of that is doing like field work, paper maps. There's a lot of kind of mapping adjacent to geology. But during that time, I actually took a few GIS courses and sort of the intro track there, and then some upper level courses that interestingly weren't, required coursework, but I'd just been kind of told from some older mentors like, hey, you should try this out. This is pretty interesting, and this could be a useful skill down the road. So there was no forward looking plan of what that was going to actually look like, but decided to do it. And then that kind of gave me some skills that I came out of school with that ended up landing in my first job, which was a contractor at Apple Maps. So when I was there, I was basically doing like the map edits, a lot of grunt work, like going through tickets and, analyzing like what's wrong with this road segment, what's going on here. Did that for a few years, kind of decided it'd be good to not be only talking to a computer all day. It'd be nice to actually talk to people. So I ended up looking at jobs that were in sort of the same map space because I've kind of liked that discipline. And then I ended up finding Mapbox, which had some sales roles open. And I thought that would be a good temperament fit. I'm marrying the, talking to people with actually the map background, and ended up applying, got in. It was up in San Francisco and I was in the Bay Area already. And then started off there as a SDR, which is, for those that don't know, it's sort of like the entry level sales position where you're doing cold calls, doing a lot of outreach to people that are not necessarily interested, but you have to kind of convince them that it's a good idea to talk to you. Get a lot of hangups, a lot of please don't call me back. But you do get a lot of people that are genuinely like, okay, this is actually really cool. I've been wanting to talk to Mapbox. And then you kind of go down the road of starting the conversation and opening up the opportunity there. And then from there, I moved into more of a traditional seller role that I've been in for the past 5 years or so. And started off with smaller customers, lots of different verticals that Mapbox touches. So you get a really good kind of crash course on pretty much any end customer that could be using maps. And then over time, I started concentrating around the telco space. And then more recently, I'm working on some of the AI work that Mapbox is doing. And sort of a lot of that is like completely unknown to the whole space. So we're sort of discovering it as we go. And that's pretty exciting. So that's been a fun part of the journey so far. But I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, what's interesting to me when we first talked was there's a lot of parallels in terms of some of the steps that I took in my career. So it's pretty interesting to hear that you had a very similar path. Even from university, I have a geography degree with some courses in GIS, and then eventually made my way into a tech company. I think I first wanted to start with to talk about that journey. Learning some of these different tools. What stood out to you about using that type of technology, and then how did you start to move into working for one of the largest, or at the time it was still growing quite a bit, and we'll talk about that as well. But Mapbox has certainly become one of the largest companies in geospatial that's kind of grown from a small idea into a very big company. What was it like, that transition from like, I really am interested in this technology, starting to put it into place and use it with Apple, and then actually move into a full blown kind of tech startup?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could say there was like this grand plan that I had from the start, but it was really more always being open to learning new things, kind of a curiosity of, okay, well, this could be an interesting skill to pick up and kind of put in my toolbox. GIS sort of was one of those that I was just kind of plopping in the toolbox of, maybe this will be useful later. But yeah, I wanted to be like a, kind of field geologist doing either work in environmental or maybe mining or oil and gas. Those were sort of the tracks that you could do if you wanted to not continue along academia. So I was looking at those jobs when I left school, and I actually had an offer to go out to like West Texas and live, basically on an oil rig and work like a month on, month off in the middle of nowhere. And then I was looking at other options because the guy on the phone basically tried to convince me out of doing it because they have such a high churn rate that they were like, hey, like, if you're not sure, take a couple weeks and keep looking and then get back to us. And I said, okay, cool. During that time period, I ended up getting in contact with some folks from Apple who were doing the recruiting for the GIS contract roles. Ended up doing that. But it was because I had that skill set that I just decided to plop in my toolbox without necessarily a plan around it, that I had more options at my disposal. So I think if I was like giving advice to a college student today, it's like, just be open to other skills and don't get like stuck on these tracks, because the tracks don't always exist and they might not exist like by the time you're done. It's just better to have this idea of like, okay, I'm just going to acquire skills, and maybe that's going to be completely useless for you later, but more likely it will come in handy in some roundabout way that you weren't expecting. So, but yeah, and then going into Mapbox, with that background, I had a little bit of a leg up just because I was already familiar with the space. A lot of people that go into, sales or customer roles in tech don't necessarily have a background in that company's focus area. They just have the sales skills. But if you can combine people skills and customer engagement skills with a real solid foundation of background, then that's like a really powerful combo.
When you're working in those like customer facing roles, I think that oftentimes it gets overlooked. It's a fundamental part of the whole geospatial world, right? When you're actually talking to people, helping them use technology and do all those different things, you see a lot of different things very quickly. You're talking to people doing lots of different stuff, and you quickly understand the depth of what can be done and understand the challenges, and it really puts your thinking to work in a very like rapid way. And that's what I really enjoyed about doing some of those different roles when you're working with lots of people at once, is you're getting kind of tested in terms of all the different ways you can think about things to help them solve a problem. And this is, of course, in some of your early days at Mapbox. Talk to me kind of about what that journey was like, some of that transition, how you kind of applied some of the skills you already had to, kind of creating this new role, and what it was like, kind of going from when you started at Mapbox to kind of where it's evolved to now.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's really interesting is you're constantly context switching. So like especially early on when I had less of a concentration of what the type of customers I was working with, you'd be talking to a travel customer and then you'd get off and jump onto the next call like 5 minutes later, and you're talking to maybe like a defense related customer, or you switch calls again and you're talking to a running app. So you're kind of like constantly moving from like this use case to this type of like customer that's, thinking about their users, to a completely different mindset. But the cool thing about Mapbox is we're not selling stuff out of the box. It's all APIs and SDKs that are more of a platform. So you can have the same mix of services that help one customer, find the best running trail, and then the next customer is going to use that for something completely different. And you kind of build up this sort of language of speaking to customers, like here's the different use cases, and you can kind of think on the fly of like how these things could actually be implemented. And you're hearing what they're saying. It's like mostly listening. and mostly listening to what their problems are and then saying, okay, maybe this is how we could approach it. So that's really fun. And that's why I like Mapbox, is that there's all this different stuff that you're touching. And no day is really the same because you're always kind of thinking about a completely new challenge with the same sort of rhyme in the background. But yeah, it started out when I was there, probably like 400 or so employees in 2019 before COVID, and now we're close to 800 or 900. And so it's grown a lot. Obviously, we've done a lot of investment in a whole bunch of new technologies, and the team has grown from just the original founding culture, which is, started in a garage way back in the day. That a lot of that founding team is still here, but we also have a lot of leaders and product folks and engineering folks from all these other backgrounds and walks of like big tech and, other companies that bring something to the culture too. So it's sort of like being a teenager as a company. Like you get you grow a lot, but you also have all this new stuff that you're kind of stepping into too. So it's like a coming of age rather than just like the early childhood. So I think that's a pretty cool stage to be in as a company.
I remember the infant stage. My first interaction with Mapbox was in 2012 using TileMill, creating and styling my own tiles in Carto CSS, which is a really big throwback for anyone who did that. And then, uploading it to, Mapbox and building the map. So I've seen it through all these different stages. And now, obviously, you've, you're doing a lot of really interesting things. Your role has changed a little bit. So I want to hear a little bit about kind of what you're doing now. And then really what you're seeing as like some of the new pieces that are coming out, how you're using AI, how, apps are, kind of that whole app development cycle has changed, and what you're seeing there, because I think that's, there's a lot happening and that you're able to do a lot more. So as I was kind of, wanted to dive into that. So tell me a little bit about kind of what your focus is today, and then kind of how you see these new technologies both getting used in the product, but as well as, you using them personally to kind of create some really cool things.
Yeah, definitely. I think, over the last year, especially, I've had more of a chance to work on sort of the forefront of some of the work that Mapbox is doing, especially around AI. And that's mostly because I started working with some of our larger AI customers. We work with OpenAI and a few others. And instead of like a lot of companies, I think are like, oh, we need to figure out our AI strategy. I think what Mapbox has done is actually pretty smart. Instead of trying to like anticipate what everyone wants and maybe get it wrong, we're actually just listening to or observing the problems that we see in the AI space for maps. So for example, like answer a geospatial or like a where question. If you ask like any of the LLMs for directions, it can give you like generally where you're going, but it can't give you, here's the steps, here's where you go. It can't really understand the sense of place for where different POIs or, a restaurant or a hotel is in relation to where you are. So that's a huge problem because that's one of the 5 types of questions is where. And that's what they're doing is answering questions. So Mapbox has stepped in and developed quite a few different mediums for how we can see that actually playing out. And in terms of helping the AI labs directly with either training the models or having add-ons to the models that can call out to location services. But we're also looking at building agents that directly support the enterprise side too. That, they have these kind of more traditional questions that they would be answering with APIs directly and integrating that into a whole workflow that's basically bespoke every time. Or could there be an agent that you drag into your workflow that handles everything to do with a where question and then passes that response back? So we're taking a few different motions at the same time. And because everything's happening so quickly and evolving so quickly, like I think that that's one of the keys to success is not going all of your eggs in one basket, but taking a few different approaches and then constantly getting validation from your customer base on, hey, this is what we need. This is good. Keep doing that. Or this is not really what we want. Just, maybe ditch those ideas quick and often, and then keep iterating. So that's been really fun. And that's new for me. I mean, in a way, as a customer facing role, you're always doing that. And, you're relaying feedback that you're the eyes and ears, and you're relaying that back to, I guess, the brain, which is like the product and engineering teams. But doing it in more of a product development phase is really fun because there's a lot faster of a cadence you need to be doing that for. So that's always been really cool.
And I think one of the other things that you pointed, I mean, we're still in early days with a lot of the AI integration with geospatial. And there's so many different things happening, from embeddings and foundational models, agentic workflows. Can you adapt geospatial data to work in a text-based model? There's a ton of different stuff happening. And I've seen some of the stuff pop up from Mapbox and ChatGPT in different places. So it's cool to see those things come in there. But you're 100% right. The models today out of the box they have very basic stuff. Like I was planning a road trip, and it could kind of tell me you're gonna take I-95. Well, I knew that already. So, this is not news to me that I'm gonna be, taking this road. So, that alone, kind of proves that case. And, there's a lot of need for more layers, more agents to understand not just directions, but places and, the real-time context and all this different stuff. But of course, another big way that people are using AI is to actually build and develop. And that's one thing that you did. I know you built the airport travel time kind of application with Mapbox. And I wanted to kind of dive into that to understand, okay, how did you do that? What was your web dev experience before that? How did you kind of come up with that idea and then actually kind of put it all into practice? Like what did that look like behind the scenes? Because it's something that's needed, obviously. And I think you built it for a very specific need. Dive into that because I think, and I'll try to grab a screenshot of that and add it to the video here. But yeah, tell me about that process.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think one of the things that intimidates a lot of people about the AI space today is that it's like, oh, well, I'm so far behind and I don't really know what's going on. And there's all this new stuff that's happening every week and there's no way I can catch up. But because it's moving so fast, if you just kind of enter midstream and start learning now, all the stuff that people knew that were the experts, like even a month ago or, 6 months ago, that expertise is already stale. So you can jump in and you can become the expert from today on everything. And then you can kind of catch up pretty quickly because there's so much turnover in the relevancy of the knowledge. You need to kind of embrace that you're not going to know everything. Even like tomorrow, there's going to be something that makes what you know today out of date. But I do think that the kind of remedy to that is just to immerse yourself in trying out all these different tools. And it's way more accessible than it ever has been to go sign up for even a trial or, most of these tools cap out at like $20 a month for either like a code development tool or even most of the models. If you want to use the pro versions, they're like $20 or so. So get a little creative, maybe cancel some subscriptions so you're not spending like $400 a month on AI, which definitely can happen. But, go into that with that mindset of just, I'm going to go experiment and see what I can do. So I was thinking about a kind of common problem that I have, which is like, when should I actually leave to go to the airport? So I hate being at the airport for like an hour and a half and just waiting, but I also don't want to miss my flight. So I was trying to figure out what would be the best time to leave with traffic, with the TSA wait times, and then get in, that sweet spot where you just kind of walk in and walk straight to the gate and you're on. So I built this little tool that you can just enter in your current address using the Mapbox geocode stuff. It creates like a directions call that tells you this is the ETA to the airport and this is the route that you're going to take. And then it tells you the general TSA wait time based on some estimates from some data that they have out there. And then it tells you this is the time you leave, this is the time of your flight. And it kind of works backwards from there. But that was all done just using, kind of the idea and then I think I use Replit for this. So you can kind of think of an idea, talk to the agent in the code interface, and then start iterating. And, you have to have the concept and what your kind of end goal is in your head. But if you can kind of get through that process by not having to worry about all the syntax and getting stuck on these little more tedious items, then you can really focus on the overall experience and moving that forward. So I had some web dev experience like CSS and HTML, but I would basically describe it as the equivalent of being able to order off the menu in Spanish. So I could get by, but, and it would be a slog. Or if I really needed to get somewhere that was more complicated, I'd have to study and then, speak in kind of a broken, accent. But with the AI tools and this enhancement that you can do with using the agents and using the code editors that have some of this built in, it's just supercharging you. So now you're basically near fluent. Obviously, there's some things that are going to require a little bit more of a sit down and you'll have to figure out. But if you're doing something basic or you're trying to get a prototype out, it's really powerful for, the average non-developer, non-engineer to approach and start getting ideas going. And you can take that and bring it to, if you're at a company and you have an idea, you can build something in your spare time and come bring it to them and say, hey, this is pretty cool. Could you guys run with this? And it's way easier to explain an idea if you've already got a kind of working version, even if it's like a V0, V1. and then it helps you communicate. So that's actually happened a couple of times in Mapbox too. I built this other tool that was basically like an AI map style editor where you could just describe the style and then it would understand in the chat, like, okay, this is a Halloween themed map. And it would edit the Mapbox style spec, which is basically just a structured output in JSON. And it would understand what you were trying to get at. Like Halloween means like black and white and maybe some like spooky fog layers. And then it edits all that. So that was something that I just kind of did for fun, shared with some of the Mapbox map design team. And now we have something very similar that we built for basically an AI editor for the map styles. So that's pretty powerful to be able to do that as like the sales guy, so it's fun.
There's something to be said about saying an idea and talking about it versus showing it. And I think that's one of the, if not at least the biggest things that AI kind of enables, especially if it's something new that, you're trying out for the first time, and even if you're not trying out for the first time, it can help you get an idea in a more fully concrete form and actually show it, even if it's not perfect. And I've done this a few times. I've built like QGIS plugins that, kind of connect and do things. And they're not products by any means. They're just, I'm probably not going to become a GIS or a QGIS plugin developer expert, but it allows me to say, here's something I know can be done, put it together and put an idea in front of people, which is really important. And I think that's what it can really help enable. And I also think like AI another big thing that you pointed out is it helps you get over those like little hurdles, right?
Yeah.
Even simple things of, reading it, if you're doing in Python, reading in files, if you're, building an application, help me build the React, kind of structure and handle routing and stuff like that. You can learn all these things. And if that's the route and the career path you want to go down, you should understand the deep intricacies and details of that. But if you're just building a, kind of what a lot of people call a proof of concept or an early prototype, that gets you pretty far. And it tells you a lot to be able to kind of show the thing and then take that as an idea, especially in your role or anyone's role that's talking to people, hearing ideas and customers, actually being able to show that and express that and then take that further gets people a lot more buy-in. I think as you were kind of working with the AI and building these different prototypes out, one big thing I've heard is like this kind of, being like a super power user or like super contributor of like, you can take an idea, express it and go from there. But also on the back end, if there's no like bad question for the agent, I think that's really important as well. It can help you get past these little roadblocks that you could have gotten totally stuck on before. And I've had this like in days before AI, I spent hours trying to figure out how to like read through nested JSON before I really knew how to do that well, and like that could have gotten you past that hurdle really quickly. Is that kind of the same thing you're being able to see is like, it allows me to do things much faster, express these ideas and be this kind of like, kind of take things to an accelerated speed and then also kind of work at a pace that you can also, not only just get past problems, but learn them and understand the way to solve them in the future.
Yeah, it's like, imagine if like we had to write every email that we ever, or every essay that you ever wrote with a typewriter or even by writing it by hand. There would be way more just like mental load just on, I spelled that wrong and I have to start over this whole paragraph. And I don't even know how you do that with the typewriter. Like it's so foreign, but I think we're going to look back and, at some of those tedious tasks that just sort of get in the way. They're not actually part of the critical thinking. They're a part of just like, I've got to kind of make sure I do this correctly. Those are going to look like, why would we ever approach it that way? It just makes so much more sense to have those tedious pieces sort of automated away or just, you don't have to think about it as heavily and you can focus on what is the big picture? What am I actually trying to say or what am I trying to do or what am I trying to build? But yeah, I think the other thing that it does is just it takes kind of that starting energy out of any kind of problem. Like when people have writer's block, a lot of the time they just can't think of like the first word to say or like the first sentence. But once you kind of just start writing, even if it's not perfect, you can go back and edit it later. You've already got the momentum rolling. And I think that's what AI unlocks at scale, because even like in bigger companies, a lot of the times they get stuck on rolling things out is because it just takes a while to plan everything. And then, okay, we're going to do this in 6 months. This is the plan. This is how we're going to work backwards. But if you can just start it with like this low risk, low effort, first prototype, and then you've already got a lot of the thinking and, process out of the way because you already kind of focused on that to just get it rolling, then it's just iterating from the starting point. But if you're struggling to get that first thing before, and you have to plan out when you're going to even have the first prototype 6 months out, you just wasted a lot of time. So I think that there's going to be this culture shift in, like, startups already do this by default, but I think that in bigger companies, there's going to be this culture shift of, why would this take 6 months? This can be done at like at least 60% of the way there can be done very quickly. And then you can start throwing out bad ideas quicker and get a faster cycle time of new ideas, which is basically what it is when you're innovating. How fast can you cycle through ideas?
Yeah, I mean, you're failing fast or succeeding fast, and you're testing a lot of things very quickly, which I think is the what we'll see as like these AI apps that are going to eventually be built, and you hear all about it as the big next wave of people building AI apps inside of companies to do lots of different things, and out of all of those, some are going to be really successful, some maybe not. But the fact that they're getting built instead of sitting on an idea, and more people can express what they want to do is something really powerful. And I think that's like, we need to, kind of understand what that future looks like. And it allows many different people from, especially if it's an area that you're not practiced in. Like if I wanted to go build a model in Torch Geo or something like that, or do deep learning, that's a whole new area for me. But at least it helps me get started and go over the hurdle and get to, doing it and understanding it. And that's really the power of all of it. I think, oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that the AI apps or the AI companies or the AI concepts that do become successful will all start with, what are we trying to solve first, rather than we need to do something with AI. Like, that's kind of what I think the trap is right now, where probably every board member is asking every CEO, who's asking every, leadership team, who's asking every product person, what's our AI plan? Like, what are we going to do? What are we building with AI? But it should really be like, what is the biggest problem we have today? And then maybe AI is the way to solve that. But also, I think we have to be able to say, like, maybe AI is not the right approach here. But like, there are going to be ways that you can solve really hard problems in new ways with AI. And I think that's where we should start. But when I went to this conference a few weeks ago, and that was one of the things that I took away, was like, if you don't have a why behind, any new technology that's going to supercharge what you're doing, you're just going to supercharge something that doesn't really add value, versus like, start with the why and then build the thing that's going to help.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that, because when we met earlier, we talked about that conference of like the hype cycle, right? And it felt even like in the last year or two, it was like, everyone just has to have an AI strategy, whether you like it or not. And now I think we're starting to see, okay, what is it actually going to take shape in, and what are people going to build? And then I want to get your perspective, because you're talking to people every day. Where does location fit into this? Where does mapping, web mapping, where does Mapbox fit into that type of cycle that you're seeing from people, at least in these early days?
Yeah. I think that if you're asking like, what is our AI strategy, it's sort of like the wrong starting question. It should be, what is our strategy and how fundamental is AI in that? Like, it's not like a specific strategy to AI. It's like, AI is going to be existential for almost every company, and figuring out where they fit into that and how they are going to use that effectively across the entire org. But to just say, here's our goals for the year, and here's our plan, and here what are we going to do with AI? It's sort of like segmenting it wrong. It's like, you've got to think about that as like, in like, just automatically in everything. So that's maybe where some people could go wrong. But yeah, that's what I took away from that conference, is that there are a lot of people that are going to build around the hype. But even if there's like 20 or 10% of the things that remain that are focused on the right outcomes and the right whys, those are going to be super powerful. So I don't think it's like AI is hyped too much. It's probably just about, it's not underrated or overrated, but there's a lot of stuff on the side that's going to jump on the train that's going to be fluff. But the stuff that's at the core, I think, is super fundamental and super powerful. And then for location and geospatial in general, I think that, like we said earlier, like integrating the where into these types of, LLMs and any type of workflow that has to do with an LLM or AI, you have to have the where in there, because it's one of the fundamental questions we're going to have. And right now, I think we're sort of at the very early days of AI, where the main modem or a medium is talking to a chatbot, but that's not where it's going to stay. I think it's going to start going into a lot of different form factors. And as it moves more into the physical world, rather than like being at your computer asking a question or on your phone asking a question, it's going to be more dynamic. And when things are in the real world, the where becomes more important. And then there's like people talking about the next kind of stage of AI is like physical AI. That's kind of the next buzzword that maybe we'll start hearing in the next like 2 years. But again, every buzzword has a lot of truth behind it. And then there's, people talking about like robots and devices being in the real world, and they're going to have to navigate, and people are going to have to navigate. So that it's clear that that's going to become more important. And there's already companies thinking about this, and Mapbox is thinking about this. And it's just kind of following where the puck is moving rather than just thinking about the way that we interact with these things today.
Yeah, there's this right here, right now kind of problem of how can we use the chat to ask questions. I think there's the next shift of like the whole agentic thing that's creating tools that can do pieces of puzzles, and you're giving, you're either constructing that logic yourself or you're letting the agent kind of pick the tools it needs to do the job. Like I need to go get traffic data. I need to go get, some information about TSA, wait times or whatever that is. And then this whole physical shift is kind of the next wave. How are cars interacting with our world? How are we interacting with the things around us? How can we understand, and ask very simple questions like, if you're out in a corner and trying to understand information about a restaurant or, I'm here right now. Give me 3 options about where I should go and eat, and understanding where that, like that, those are the next things that we should expect to experience. And I think that's a very, cool time to see how that's playing out. How is it playing out today for, things that you can talk about in terms of, customers or people using that within Mapbox? What are some of these like, kind of creative ways that they're building right now?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I find interesting is that almost any existing Mapbox workflow can be sort of adapted to this agent world. So at the end of the day, when you're building any type of Mapbox integration, it could be a map that's used for like coverage maps for telcos, right? Like you could have, the user interact with the map and have like maybe 10, 20 clicks that they're going across the whole experience. They're panning around, they're viewing things, but there's a lot of work on the user to figure out, okay, I'm going to go to the map. And for some people, they use maps all the time, so it's super intuitive. But there's a lot of people that go to a web map and they're like, okay, well, there's a lot of dense info on here. And the more information there is on the map, and the map can really convey quite a bit of information if you have, the right data set. It's like you can just ask the chat or ask the map itself, like, I'm looking for this, help me. And then it will sort of control the map, pan to the right area, highlight the right information, and then take a lot of the clicks or like the mental load off of the user so that they're just getting straight to the insight, which for a lot of companies, that's what they optimize for. When they have a map, they're just trying to help users get to an answer faster than a list would. But if you can talk to the map, you can skip a lot of the mental steps for the user so that they can just get the answer. And then they have a visual aid to help them understand what that means. So that's an example, but like that form factor is sort of the common thread that I'm seeing. It's like you already have a map. So you're already understanding that this is better than a list. What's better than just the map is sort of a guided map that's more interactive than just you interacting. It's interacting to you rather than you're interacting with it. So that's one of the things, that's the that I'm seeing most commonly.
It's effectively kind of like, you're dynamically changing the results of what you're seeing based on the context that you need, which has kind of always been the dream in in any form of cartography. I mean, cartography, and again, kind of going full circle, going all the way back to somewhat of I remember some professor at the University of Wisconsin saying this is like cartography is basically deciding, how, you're throwing away 99% of the earth. What's the 1% you keep for this very specific thing? Instead of now, you're not making that choice for, your thousands or millions of users that are using that specific thing. For example, if you're Strava, you need a very specific layers to help understand people, that they're trying to understand. But now you can actually create and have AI create that map for that one person at that one problem at that one specific point in time.
Exactly.
And it can really hone in and understand that, which is a very kind of dream of what, we really be able to do, which is cool to see and exciting to see Mapbox kind of like leading a charge on that.
Totally. And it's sort of the Mapbox story overall. If you look at our viewpoint on web maps originally, it was, okay, well, how do we make it easier for people to build maps on the web? And how do we build tools that make that simpler? And how do we make it so that it's not just like a one size fits all generic experience, but you can actually build something pretty custom? So it's like customization plus, I guess, widening the audience of who can build a map. And that's still what we're doing with the AI work all through that iteration. It's like expand the audience so more people can access, what the map is telling you or what the map can display. And then, obviously make it more custom to the end problem. So it is a pretty cool space. And then there's a lot of things that don't necessarily have to have a physical map. Like, you don't have to even have a map for a lot of Mapbox use cases. There's a lot of backend data questions that can be answered using maps or map data or location data. And I think that's a really big part of the problem too, because a lot of the information that's in LLMs is basically as useful as it is up to date. And maps are one of the most dynamic pieces of data you can have. If the date of the map is like a year old, there's so much new stuff that's been added. There's new roads, there's new buildings. It's not like a static world. So having a constantly evolving living map is also pretty important for the relevancy of the information for those things.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. It's a cool time. And I mean, there's things that are going to evolve and change very quickly, but it's interesting to hear how you've applied it right away. Oh, Mapbox as a company is really starting to apply and build these things out. And then, some practical ways that people can actually get started and do this. I appreciate kind of, going through kind of showing people kind of what's under the hood there and how to do that. If people want to learn more, follow along with some of the stuff that you're doing, how can they see all the things that you're working on?
Yeah, I think for Mapbox specifically, I just go to mapbox.com. We actually just had a whole event this past week over the course of a week. It's like a virtual conference where we had over 60 sessions where you can go in and drop into any of those through that link. And you can join a session that's like 45 minutes on how to build a map or how different APIs work, or hear from some of our product or leadership team. So that's a cool place to start. And then, in general for the AI work, I think we're putting out more and more content and we're looking for more users to start testing this stuff, either the agent, we have an MCP that we built recently. We have some of the more developer focused tools that are, having some AI focus there. So there's a lot of stuff that we're putting out there and we're looking to get validation and feedback. So you can always contact Mapbox at our support channels or contact our sales team, and they're happy to talk to you about any feedback you have. Even if you're not trying to buy something, you can tell us like, hey, I used this. It's really awesome. I wanted to just tell you guys this is where I used it. So we're always looking to hear that stuff. And then I have a Twitter handle. It's like KMcMaps. I'll share it with you if you want to put it in the bio or something, but I post stuff about this too.
Yeah, I'll drop everything in the show notes here. So depending on what channel you're watching on, it'll be in the description somewhere, depending where you're catching that. So yeah, Kieran, thanks for kind of taking the time to share all this. It's really cool to kind of hear your journey and then how that's playing out in, across technology, across organizations, and then how you're just applying it yourself. So I appreciate the time, and thanks for spending a few minutes with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I love the channel. I like how you're, thinking about a lot of different members of the audience and how you can apply some advice to different cohorts, and talking to people in the industry is like a really cool way to do that. So happy to be here and happy to have participated. So awesome.
Awesome. Thanks.
Sweet.